Aye.
They call to order the zoning committee meeting for February 12th, 2008. The first thing on my agenda of substance is number 2 is to review a draft ordinance creating local regulations for medical marijuana growing, processing, and dispensaries that the town attorney has determined do not conflict with Act 16 of the 2016, the Medical Marijuana Act. Should town council deem it appropriate, a resolution can be placed on the February 26, 2018 regular business meeting agenda, invoking the pending ordinance doctrine, which allows a draft ordinance to take effect until the Planning Commission and Town Council, through its usual public review process, adopts a final version of the ordinance. The draft of the ordinance is attached to on the computer. It's, I think, the third last document. Do we want to just go through it real quickly? I'll go through it.
Sure. Yeah. Let me do, if it's okay, just a really short introduction, and then I'll turn it over to Bruce since he was more part of the drafting team here. I think, as council is aware, Act 16 of 2016 was a pretty comprehensive regulation as far as how medical marijuana facilities, including growing, processing, and dispensaries, are handled. So there's I think it's about a 75-page act, kind of soup to nuts as to all things medical marijuana. However, there is some limited ability by the town to zone where these types of establishments can be used. It's something somewhat similar to Marcellus Shale oil and gas type regulation, in that you really can't regulate how they operate, but you can, to an extent, regulate where they operate. So with that in mind, and I guess one other kind of caveat in the zoning context specifically is you have to essentially allow, you can't put additional regulations on this particular use that are not already on similar uses already in that particular zoning district. For instance, dispensaries, very similar to pharmacies, that type of use. So if you had a regulation for pharmacies that you had to do X, Y, and Z for a pharmacy, you couldn't do anything more than X, Y, or Z to put a dispensary in. So that's kind of the general framework. When it comes to the processing facilities, those are most akin, according to the Act, to manufacturing and light industrial type activity. So that the regulations you're putting on these uses have to be consistent with current regulations you have on similar uses in that particular zoning district. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bruce, did I miss anything that you wanted me to cover right off the bat?
I can't think of anything offhand, so if there's something that comes up as we're talking.
Okay, do we want to talk about the pending ordinance doctrine at all up top, or we want to hold off on that? Okay, we'll hold off on that. Bruce?
So we were given the direction to develop an ordinance for medical marijuana. As Gavin stated, there are regulations, there are 43 pages of regulations that medical marijuana producers, researchers, and dispensaries have to follow. And we are limited in what we can do through zoning in addition to that. So we start off in this ordinance with 4 definitions. Medical marijuana defines medical marijuana. Our definitions are almost verbatim from the state law. Second definition is medical marijuana academic clinical research center. That is verbatim. Dispensary is verbatim. Where we have a little bit of a difference is medical marijuana grower and processor. The state law directs us to put those in agricultural and industrial areas. The town does not have a specific agricultural district. And although we do have an industrial district, the location is yet to be determined. In other words, we have it listed, but we do not have one. So we added into this definition of marijuana grower processor. What's it most like? It is most like a farm in the town of McCandless. Farms in the town of McCandless are very strictly regulated as a conditional use, and I'll get into that shortly. So from the zoning code, definitions that already exist in the zoning code, we had to change some of the language in our zoning code definitions to clarify that a farm specifically includes a medical marijuana grower and processor. And a farm building, the thing about grower processors is it has to be in a secure enclosed, has to be grown in a secure enclosed building. So we define farm buildings in the town code, and we have specific regulations about setbacks on those buildings. So we added we made it clear in our farm building that marijuana growing and processing is considered a farm building. Tucker Arnsberg did add a note in here that will be taken out if we proceed with this ordinance. It says that the bold language in your ordinance are additions to those definitions. So then the next thing we had to do was come up with where are we going to permit those. The first part is a clinical research center. We thought the most logical site, since it has to be an accredited medical school in the Commonwealth. Where is that most likely to take place? We do not, as far as I know, McCandless have any of those, but it would most likely be in our I institutional zone district, and that's where we place that. So that will reflect, if we go ahead with this, that will be reflected in we have a table. It will be reflected in our table. We'll add that in 134101. The dispensaries we have in, as Gavin said, we can't regulate it any differently than similar uses, most likely a pharmacy. So we have it in our C3 and C4. And one of the notes that we have in here is that we do permit those uses possibly in an RC and a C2 and anywhere from C5 through C8. We decided not to let those go into those districts because those districts are residential, have some residential characteristics to them, and we didn't want to totally intermingle those with residential. C8, for example, is a small part of the town that's pretty well taken up. So we didn't put it in there. C7 is office space, and we have limited retail in office space, and it wouldn't fit in there. Again, that would be an amendment to our table that we have in section 134101. The next one is the grower and processor, and this is the one that presents us with the most difficult decisions that we had to make in writing this ordinance. We decided to put it in a farm. Our farms are permitted in R1 and R2. You have to keep in mind that we were very strict in our regulations in farms, and we'll get into that a little bit later. At first glance, it may seem that, hey, we're putting these in R1 and R2, but when you look at our regulations, I don't feel it doesn't seem as though it will be as offensive as it may seem at first glance. So the part on medical marijuana, academic clinical research, these are items that are already in the state code, and we just added one onto that. We always want to make clear that our parking requirements, in accordance with our town code, we can require a parking study. And in this case, since we don't have that specific use, a parking study would be required in order to reduce the amount of the number of parking spaces. So we added that item into that part, those regulations. By the way, this is a conditional use. The conditional use, what a conditional use is, that it must go through planning commission, there would be a public hearing, and then it would be voted on by council. That process typically would take about 2 months from start to finish. All three of these new uses are conditional uses. The medical marijuana dispensary, as we said, would be in the C3 and C4. And the express criteria, again, are the express criteria that are in the state code. And we added the parking part of our ordinance into that also. So, again, we're now into the grower and processor. As I said, this is the one that we had the most difficult part. It was the most difficult thing to deal with. We already permit farms. A farm has to be 5 acres. So that's the start with a farm in the town of McCandless. And we have also, the 3 relevant things are, we have about 14 different items that are in as a requirement, 16 different items in the zoning ordinance that deal with farms, and I'll pass those out if you want to look at them. But most of them don't apply to this specific use. I thought I had 10 of them. Whoops. I did have that. Yeah, there you go.
We have one missing? We have 2 here, so it looks like we have 1 extra.
So the 3 key parts, there are things in there about erosion and sedimentation control. Those items always have to be followed. Thank you. Those items always have to be followed. But the 3 key things are the 5 acres, and we have a 175-foot setback from a neighboring property for any farm building. We define the marijuana grower processor as being in a farm building, so there's a 175-foot setback. So those 2 combinations greatly restrict where it can be placed, even though it is an R1 and R2 zoning district. We require a buffer yard E. We may want to think about expanding that, making it a little more strict. Buffer yard E can go down to 10 foot wide, and there are no conifers or anything like that are in that buffer yard E. So we might want to look at making that a little more strict. I don't know. That's an item for discussion. And again, all the items that we have listed in here, in addition to those, are items which are permitted or which are in the state law, and they're pretty strict regulations. The one thing that, and again, we have the parking requirements in here. The one thing we talked about today is, I started looking into what a producer processor may have to do, and there will be additional traffic due to the processing, possibly due to the processing. They're going to need more supplies. A lot of farms have high traffic uses. The farms in the town of McCandless do not have high traffic, but we may want to have them on collector or minor arterial roads. So, and when I look at that, Richard Road would be an example. We have farms on Richard Road right now, and that would be a good location, possibly a good location to have these growers. And we have another one on Minor Road. I don't know if that one would meet the setback requirements because of the size of the width of the lot. It seems as though there'd be a place to put it. But I have a map here of all the parcels and haven't had a chance to narrow it down with that addition.
And you also made the comment to me about frontage.
The frontage would be, suggested it be 100 foot because there are a lot of places. This is a map of all the 5 acre parcels. Greg brought up a good point in a discussion earlier today that what we may have in our GIS listed as 5 acres or less doesn't necessarily agree with what the county may have as being 5 acres or less. Now, a lot of those could be due to deed, the way the deed is written. A lot of deeds go to the center of the road, and the deeds that isn't part of our calculation in the GIS system. So I think that's something we're going to have to look at a little more carefully, and we're going to have to narrow down the exact parcels. Pine Creek Road may have a parcel that would fit, but a lot of the parcels that you see on here are not on minor arterial or collector roads with 100 foot of frontage. Some of them are off of private roads. There is a large parcel on Pine Creek Road that still has remnants of the farm. They have not abandoned the farm concept, but that would be a place on Pine Creek Road. It's just past Minor Road. So those are some of the areas that we could put it. And that's pretty much the ordinance. I don't think I missed any of the things that we've changed on it.
Bruce, there's a lot of detail that you've gone over, and I read as carefully as possible in time available. But I was curious, a basic point. You speak of a farm, the farm would be growing what? I guess they'd be growing marijuana plants, right?
Yes.
How does something has to happen that plant could be, wouldn't be inherently medicinal, I wouldn't think, or is it? Wouldn't it have to be treated in some fashion to become
Yeah,
medicinal?
that's part of the processing, and I don't understand the complete
Yeah.
processing, but as I understand it, they have to extract the part which is used for the medicinal purposes, which are stated in the state law that it can be used for.
Right. Would it be illegal for someone with a 5-acre tract, for example, or for that matter in your backyard, to grow a couple marijuana plants and smoke them?
I imagine it would be, yes.
Okay, but, so if you grew it, you'd have to process it to change it to something that's,
Correct, and that all has to be indoors and in a secure building with electronic surveillance.
okay. And then the other thing is obviously there's a lot of stuff that's gonna have to be figured out here, but the medical marijuana dispensary, how is that, could a pharmacy easily qualify for that designation?
I don't believe so, not automatically for sure it would not qualify. Because of the state law, there are a lot of regulations that are in the state law for what a dispensary has to be. One just opened in the city of Butler, that's the only one I know in western Pennsylvania, and they have a large number of regulations that they had to go through in order to be able to do that. And it can't just be a pharmacy. I believe there has to be a doctor present, one of the
Doctor or pharmacist?
pharmacist. So there are a lot of regulations that they have to go through that are a little different than a pharmacy.
Thank you.
Bruce, did you comment on words that we, in essence, borrowed from our neighbor, Ross Township?
Oh, yes.
1,000 feet from a property line of a public park or place of worship?
Yeah, the town is permitted to regulate 1,000 feet from schools. Actually, the state law regulates 1,000 feet from schools, and the town added parks and churches. We felt as though that we could get away with doing that. Ross Township did the same thing.
So is that in this section,
9.
It's on page 5.
section 9, yeah,
It's throughout.
well, just a second. 5 is a medical marijuana dispensary may not be located within 1,000 feet of the property line of a public, private, or parochial school or daycare center unless this requirement is waived by the Department of Health. So that's the one that the state requires. Unless this requirement is waived by the Department of Health, I'm not sure what that means.
I think that's right from the statute, right?
That is.
Bruce? So they can apply to the Department of Health and establish circumstances under which they should be permitted to operate even within that 1,000-foot radius.
Now, speaking to that, I thought we weren't allowed to treat pharmacies different than the medical marijuana dispensaries.
Only to the extent that the state law does itself can you do it. So
Because, our medicine shop in Inglewood is 340 feet from the front door of the school.
right, but the state statute has the 1,000 feet from the school. The real question and where it becomes more murky is whenever you add places of worship and parks, because that's not right in the statute. Arguably, the town has a interest in the health, safety, and welfare of its residents to add that as an additional regulation, but you have to say that could be subject to challenge.
Well, let me read number 6 then. It's the medical marijuana dispensary may not be located within 1,000 feet of the property line of a public park or place of worship unless this requirement is waived by the Department of Health. Is that requirement already waived?
That requirement doesn't exist in the state law.
It doesn't exist.
That's a good point, Greg. I don't know, Gavin, what do you think about that? Could we take that, since Greg's point's a good one, I mean, it appears to already be waived by them. Maybe we should take that out?
What you're saying, do not put the potential that the Department of Health could come in and waive it for us? Is that-
Yes.
Well, I mean, the more that makes it, tending to be more restrictive rather than less, when that requirement already doesn't exist under the state law, giving the Department of Health kind of the final say would seem to make sense, would seem to be consistent with the way they're handling schools and daycare centers.
So what you're saying is that is an even further out for us if it would be challenged. It's like, yeah, you could apply to the Department of Health.
That would be one of the
That would-
positions we'd take, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
If it possibly would be challenged, why even put it in there?
And why would we want to make it more difficult for something that has such a potential to help people?
That's a great question, man. This is trying to be as protective and restrictive as possible, but that by no means is that the direction we're saying is proper. That's just the way it was proposed. And kind of just so everyone is aware, and I'm going to just briefly touch on the pending ordinance because I think it's appropriate now. What we were given the task of on a pretty short notice here was to try to get some sort of framework of regulations in place in order to prevent, what they call kind of a race to the zoning office, which is, hey, look, there's no regulations on the book. I'm going to go ahead, file an application, and try to establish that I can put this basically anywhere I want because you don't have any regulations. So what we tried to do is put something in there that's, reasonable, something we could defend. But the real idea is that this, assuming that council decides to adopt a pending ordinance resolution at the end of the month, which would make this immediately effective. Either way, if you do or if you don't, what's going to happen is this is going to kick over to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is going to really kind of mull through some of the details here and kind of analyze, all right, where does this make sense? Do these proposed regulations, is this really where it should be? Should we propose it somewhere else? So the ultimate, kind of final version of this may not look anything like this, but this gets something on the books now because you have nothing on the books, essentially. So that's why we are where we are.
I will add that, after reading the article and learning that Ross added those restrictions, I didn't object to them. In fact, I brought it up and suggested that we should at least consider that, and perhaps the public comment would bolster that feeling. But I do think it's important that we get something in place, and so I would not object to keeping those in there. But I do think the need to get something in place to protect us from a rush to the zoning office is important.
I don't think there's a
I
downside.
don't think there's that much necessity to prevent that a rush to the zoning office. I mean, it's been 22 months since this act was passed, and we still don't have anything. We didn't even bother to put it on the ordinance until Kim Zachary suggested that we look at it. So I don't really see the rush that you see.
Yeah, I don't see a rush, and I don't see what would be wrong with what the state's already got. I don't see any reason to add more. If we are going to discuss this over months and come up with more to add over months, that would be one thing. But
Yeah.
to add for the state for just in the next 2 weeks so that we can put something down in 2 weeks doesn't make much sense to me.
No, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm just saying that, to be quite frank, Toby and Bruce called me, and I said I was having a real problem with using a farm because knowing that the district is 5 acres and knowing that there's a property within 400 yards of me that's 5 acres that could easily be put a farm in one of these marijuana growing things processing in, and the increase in activity that you said, I could see it going through my neighborhood, and I really wasn't. I thought maybe we should focus on getting a particular place or places, not meeting definitions that can qualify anywhere, because people can put parcels of land together and meet these requirements, and you're really stuck with something that you really didn't want.
So what are you suggesting?
Well, I'm suggesting, one I was suggesting we put it in our C6, but Toby says we don't have the C6 in ready, it's not on our map, we don't.
Put
have
the
C6.
farm in a C6?
No, not the farm.
Just the dispensaries.
The marijuana
Processing.
processing, grower processing.
Growers and processors.
Or
Wouldn't
else,
that be the farm?
or guess, I'll take,
The growers and processors would be the
It's-
farm.
yeah, it would be a
It's
farm.
It's farm by our definition only. We could change that to not make it a farm.
Yeah, but ideally, the way that the state statute treats it is more of a processing, light industrial use as opposed to an agricultural use.
Right,
Unfortunately, that, we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole because there's nothing even remotely close to that we can, locate this because there's no C6 district on the map. So in a perfect world, we'd have a great little C6 light industrial district and this would be a great fit right in there.
right.
Right now, you don't have that, so, it's gonna be tough if someone would come in, say tomorrow, with an application for a growing or processing plant, for us to tell them where they could put that, and that becomes an issue for us, being able to establish, we do permit this, it's a valid use, where do we permit it? So we're trying to, it's not perfect, it's not even a great solution at this point,
Yeah,
but it's
but-
something that we don't have.
Well, let's slow
we don't have
down,
anything.
and do it right. Let's not rush to a solution just to get a solution. That's all I'm saying. So we were gonna kick around some ideas, I thought that's where we were going.
Yeah, we did structure it as an ordinance,
But we were,
but, we left last week's meeting was at least come up with a list of criteria or things that we could consider, maybe some locations.
Right.
So we
Yeah,
got to the point where we're able to formalize it a bit, and, I think sometimes when you see a document like this, say, well, there's the ordinance that's being proposed.
yeah,
So, but I think it's, if in case you do, if you do like it, quickly, that's why I worded it the way I did on the agenda. If you happen to say, well, this is pretty good, we realize it isn't perfect, let's get it on the books and then roll up our sleeves more. So there seem like there might be a couple of alternatives you're looking to pursue.
When you say get it on the books, you mean establish a pendant ordinance?
Yeah, just,
Now,
right.
what's the downside to doing that with the language that's before us here?
well, are you stuck with a farm?
What you would be stuck with the farm if one of the things to do, Bruce, after we finished the write-up, working with Tucker, having identified C6, and I pointed out that I have been here a fairly long time, and I've been looking, and the council have been looking for a place to put C6 for years, 30-some years. And there is, the way we've developed and what land is available, it's been difficult to find a place. And we can get away from, I think, a name. The name is not that important, the C6 label. That's just what we happen to call a zone that was created many years ago for light industrial. I think the idea is to have a place for a type of use, in this case. In this case, it's a farm, or the medical grower and processor. So we have probably have some things that are listed in the light commercial district, the C6 district, that we could put into other zones. But that's gonna take a little bit of time, I think, to determine that, either move some of the uses into another zone, eliminate the C6. We talked about that briefly this
Right,
afternoon.
yeah.
That's not a bad
and,
idea.
Yeah, I wanna go with, I prefer to go with that idea. Let's establish it, let's take our time and do it right. I don't wanna do this, I don't wanna be stuck with a farm, in a proposed ordinance, that is an R1, R2 district. Obviously, it's R1, R2. That exposes the whole, a whole lot of properties to, you have a chart there that has the properties, but people could put properties together in other areas.
Yeah, but Bruce took a stab, the sheet with the yellow parcels marked. Bruce took a stab at this on our GIS map. Got a little help from Gateway to do it quickly this afternoon, Gateway Engineers. But this shows basically every 5-acre parcel in R1 and R2, right, Bruce?
Yes.
5 acre or greater, right?
5 acre or greater. And so there they are on this, they're marked in yellow, and it's hard to start to really hunker down because a lot of the other collector roads aren't on here, like.
Does grower and processor have to go together?
I think
Because
so.
it seems
Yes.
like you could those two things have to go
They
together?
do, because the
So
greater
it has to be
process.
processed at this site where it's
Yeah.
grown, because very few things are processed where they grow.
This is, and I think it's because of the, the nature of the product. They wanna
Because we
keep it
could
under one
split
roof.
that, and then we could have it grown someplace, because the processing is what could have all the.
Yeah, but everything's indoors.
Right.
You realize that?
I do, but
Yeah.
I don't know what this process is like. Is it stinky? Is
Uh-huh.
it noisy? Do you want it in an R1 or R2? I mean, what is the process actually like? I mean, it might be terrible. I mean, having something growing in an indoor greenhouse might be fine having next to your property, but having it processed there is what might be really bad.
Yeah.
I am looking into, I know some people who have been trying to do this, not McCandless, but also, and I am trying to contact them to see what the process is. So I hopefully will have that information soon.
I'll try to make this very brief. It seems like we have three tracks.
Yeah.
Track number one is the direction that it looked like was, again, to be expedient and have something on the books, would be taking the farm approach. The next step Bruce was embarking on today was coming up with some other requirements, such as which of these 5-acre parcels, how much further could we restrict so that they would be in a more logical location in terms of traffic and proximity to other residential neighborhoods. So we're brainstorming, and we brainstormed with Greg Wilkoskas a little bit about how much frontage a parcel would have to have on a collector or minor arterial road, because those are the roads that convey the truck traffic and the other commercial type of traffic in town. That's where we want them to be, and it's not going through neighborhoods or even driving by neighborhoods as little as possible. So basically the type of road and then the amount of frontage. So if we were to tinker with that on one front, I would think we'd likely reduce this. I did some glancing at this afternoon. You could eliminate a whole lot of these yellow parcels on this map. The second track is to try to remove has been in this C6 phantom zone, basically, that we've had for 30-some or 40-some years before I even got here. I don't know if there was ever a C6 piece of ground, that was zoned or not, but we had a number of discussions, and a couple members of the Old Town Council years ago, and tried to brainstorm about where to put it, and we could never come up with a piece of C6 property. So perhaps the second alternative is to migrate the uses into other districts that we have.
Right.
See if we can
I
do
like
that.
one, yeah.
Then the third is to somehow, all of a sudden, the light bulb goes on over, a lot of people said we have new visions here, and see a place to put C6. And then,
Right.
so then if we could find at least one parcel that
Yeah,
we can label C6.
exactly.
So we have three alternatives.
And then that means that's the only place.
Well, we only have one
That's
regional
me.
commercial, for example. We have one C4, and that's a.
So that person who owns that property just happens to be
McIntyre
the
Square.
lucky one who,
It's McIntyre
gets
Square. It's a
the-
huge development. So that was somehow zoned many years ago, C4, and I think it was in 1960, not to be too historical here, 1960 when Kaufman's came in. They bought up a lot of land, and the development was put there, and it was council at that point, or the commissioners then, called it a C4 regional commercial zone. Never used that again anywhere else. Nothing, I don't think
Well,
there's
that's
anything
where,
wrong with that.
well, dispensary could go in there, C4,
The dispensary
but not
could
the
go.
grower processor.
right, but any of
He's talking
them,
about having a
to
single zone
to
district.
have one place that that one property owner would be the only one who would be allowed to put anything in a particular spot just because they're lucky enough to be zoned that way.
When you start looking at advantages and disadvantages, that's one of the advantages of having, if we retain this C6, we already have a piece of property that is a non-conforming court-ordered piece. It's the storage facilities going up Pine Creek Hill, going north. That is a C6 type of use, never was rezoned to C6. That could be the case. And there might be another piece then, if we could find another piece of ground. We did look years ago at a piece of ground on Rochester Road. It's currently zoned, I think, C3.
Well, there's R6 and C3, yes.
Next, if you look at the bottom of the map, the color that matches Bruce's sport coat, right at the very bottom of the map.
Right here.
That's a commercial, highway commercial piece of property. How that ever came about, I don't know the history. But that the councilman from that ward was Bob Powers. At one time, he and I talked at some length about rezoning that to C6. And I never got track. That's a brown piece, Tam?
Yeah, I see
This
it.
is Rochester.
Okay, Rochester.
R6 is the senior housing, Stonebrook, and then there's that chunk of property, I don't know how many acres, it's certainly more than 5. So that was a piece, but it's largely floodplain. So, but that was the problem, we started looking around, so we have 3 alternatives.
Yeah, I like the third.
Steve, go on, to answer your question, we're also suggesting it go in C3, so that there's a lot of properties it could go into, not just
The
in C4.
dispensaries.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, but the dispensaries, but if any part of this is only going to be available to even 3 locations, it seems like we shouldn't be at least changing the rules now. We should be going with what the state says for now and working towards that. It looks like from the people I've talked to that most of them are in favor of it. I haven't looked at it recently, but
People tend to be in favor of things as long as they're not in their backyard.
Yeah, right.
Once they're
I
faced
bet
with
you a lot of
having that
people would
their
be in
backyard.
favor of this if it was in their backyard, because they'd be loaded if it was.
I mean, like.
If you could be
my
the
neighbors-
dispenser, I understand that, I know what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but
Well, for the dispensary, I still think we should consider, I don't like the choice of the C3 because of certain properties. And maybe we should consider, at least look at whether, an RC, there's only, those properties are in the 4th Ward and the Ward 5, my ward. And I'd like to take a closer look. In fact, I think one of them has a drugstore on it.
Yes, it does.
It sounds like we need to spend more time looking at those.
Yeah.
A lot of time.
Definitely, a lot of time, yeah.
not, let's change something for a few weeks.
Okay,
Some
so-
direction?
Okay,
Yeah, well, go with the, right, go with the third alternative, pick a location or something that zones something else other than, and then that you think, maybe pick 1, 2, or 3 of those locations. And then why don't you run it past me, and also, I could take a look at it too, and also, well, see what you want to do with it, but say three locations.
so we've
For-
got 3 locations that are zoned
Well, I don't know what
C.
the,
You're
well,
talking about,
anything other than R1 and
you're,
R2.
you're talking about for grower processor.
Right, grower processor. Yeah, I'm okay with C4 for the dispensary, but I want to take a closer look at RC, because, again, some of those properties in C3 are not even highway properties. I don't even see how they got.
Every single one of these properties, with the exception of the very center, north of, basically off of Grubbs Road, it looks like. And to the right, east of Grubbs Road and west of Coomer Road, has homes touching. Has many homes touching. This area is right about the only ones who don't. All these have homes on them. There's homes
Are
on
you
all
talking
these
about
yellow
C-
properties.
C3 or?
On any of these yellow properties that Bruce has marked, other than the strip between Grubbs and Coomer Road, all of the locations,
Yeah.
virtually all of them, have actual plans bordering them.
Well, I'm trying to get away from C3 now. I'm trying to look at RC.
Steve's talking about grower processor.
I'm talking about
C3
any, I mean, to keep them,
C3 is a dispensary.
but to keep them away, to keep anything away from the home.
Yeah, when you look at our map, how do we keep anything away except for parks?
Right,
How do we
looking
keep it
at
away
this,
from us? How do we keep anything away from residential?
And that's going to greatly limit people who already own property who would be interested in doing this, and reduce it to a few people who just happen to have property in the very select places that we've allowed this to go in. I mean, I'm already looking, there's only about 30 properties marked on this in yellow on this map alone, and when you reduce it to ones that aren't bordering plans of homes, you're cutting it down to 8 or so.
This is just a piece of information. I mean, the only.
I understand that, but to look at it that way,
Right, yeah, so, you know, a lot of these are kind of island pieces, and a lot of them do border on residential property. And, again, it would seem that, to follow this logic, it's just, the first piece of logic is the 5 acres, where are these parcels? They should be serviced by, a collector or minor arterial roads.
We do have significant setbacks on them. More setbacks on that than we do on our commercial parcels.
So the next time, if Bruce looks at this map again and has a couple of criteria, like the 175-foot rule or these other things, you probably won't, you're right, probably maybe be half a dozen yellow blobs on it.
right.
Which, you know, is not unreasonable for something that, when you're growing, processing, we don't have farms around every corner, it's just, so, you know, you try to make a happy marriage with these kinds of things, and.
Right.
That's what we're working at. This is our first blush.
I would think that.
Yeah, that's, exactly.
I do
Yeah,
find
I
out
think
more
it's a first good effort.
about the processing too, and what all is involved.
Yeah,
And if
I'm gonna
there's-
continue to research that.
If that's-
I've tried, it's pretty, seems to me like it's pretty much boiling it down, repeatedly boiling it down. And I have seen quite a few places saying, am I going to have to live with the smell of a marijuana processing plant? But I haven't been able to find any places saying there is a smell. It seems to be everyone who has no idea asking, well, what's this gonna smell like? But nobody responding there's any odor at all.
We're still fact finding, all of us,
Yeah.
and so if you give us, you know, we'll have our own kind of ideas as staff people, where to get facts, and what facts to get, but please, if there's any other thoughts to help point us in the right direction.
Mr. Chairman, just a thought, sir. I agree
I'm
with, I
sorry,
agree.
I thought you were talking to him.
No, sir.
Toby.
I agree with your comments. I also appreciate the initiative by Councilman Zachary to start this process, because I'm just not sure of the risk that we may be under without any ordinance in place. And I know in the past, in sitting in meetings on the other side of the table, I know that concerns have been expressed, I've heard in the past, that until you have something on the books, you may be actually more wide open to things. And I
Well,
just want to ask
we may be.
Bruce, yeah, if that's a concern at all, is there?
Well, it's a concern, but I'm not gonna move rapidly. You heard someone's answer to Bill's question, I think. Does farm stay in here? And the answer is yeah. And farm is R1, R2. And I don't want to mix, I don't want these growing processors in R1 or R2 area.
I agree with you very much on that, absolutely, yes.
So do I agree.
That's
But
fine.
what is the ultimate product here that's going to be dispensed? Is it a pill? It's not a plant that
It'll be a
some,
pill, it'll be an
It's not
oil,
the
it'll be a
plant.
cream, it'll be a,
Anything
but
but
it's
plant.
not the plant.
but it wouldn't be the plant, or somebody would be. All right. That's what they process. They process into a cream.
Yeah.
And these other
Different products.
sort of
Different
medical
purposes.
type.
I'm still trying to figure out why we are worried about whether it's a farm.
That was just an idea. We're using a farm, since you're growing and processing. When the Eichners, they process turkeys, pluck,
Right.
sell. So, I mean, it's a similar concept. That's why, you know, we're looking, you know, we gave ourselves a week. We offered to try to give you something tonight to try to
Right.
take to the meeting at the end of the
Yeah,
month.
yeah, we would appreciate it.
It's a
but-
big if.
Yeah, we appreciate it. But as I think it was Gavin that said, it definitely doesn't have to be a farm.
So, is the direction that we should look further then would be to look at see, would we eliminate the farm alternative?
Yeah.
And then look at either merging these types of uses, look at the uses that are in the C6 and try to put them in another zone? Or once again, take a stab ourselves and council members looking at a zoning map and thinking, or do you have, if any of us can come up with a place or two to go to C6, then we would put these processing farms and processing and growing in a C6 and zone something C6 for that purpose. Those are the two
Well,
alternatives.
and throw out some of the other uses of a C6. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think there's two alternatives.
Oh,
One is
okay.
add to the C6, find a
Okay.
C6 and add medical marijuana growing and processing to the list that's already in the C6. Say voila, we found a
Well,
C6.
why don't we try that one and probably the other
And
one? too?
simultaneously, I think we should look at, then if we're not gonna, probably not gonna have much success with that, find places that we can move everything else that's in the C6 now and this new use, find some place for it.
Right, yeah.
And not all
both
one,
of them, both of those.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If I may try to, if I understood your question, Bill Kirk, your question was, what happens if someone comes in right now and wants to put a grower processor in? What do we do? Are we protected in any way? I think the only way that we may, and Gavin, this is a question to you, would we be able to do this as a curative amendment? If someone would come in and I say, I'm sorry, we don't have anything, let's do a curative amendment.
We could, although if they come with a curative amendment proposed to us and we have, it's deemed to be exclusionary, they could be entitled to site-specific relief. Let's put it this way, if council would refuse to place it where they would like to place it, and refuse to place it in another reasonable place, then and it's found to be unconstitutionally exclusionary, then that applicant could be entitled to site-specific relief, meaning, hey, wherever they want to put it, they can put it.
Which is what they have now, right?
Well,
That's where we are now.
Yeah, that's where we are now.
you have to be 170, to put a building in, a farm building, you already have to be 175 feet away from any property line
Correct.
on a minimum of 5 acres.
Correct.
I don't see how that could possibly affect anybody, even in a residential area. I mean, 175 feet away, six
Well, the-
trees would probably
Well,
cover.
the vehicles running back and forth, the supply vehicles and,
I don't know how many supply vehicles I know.
well.
I remember people in high school who did it in their kitchen with a car.
Okay.
I mean, I understand this is a bigger process, but I'd be very surprised if something like that would even need more than a dump truck and maybe a trailer with a tank on the back of it or something.
Yeah,
I can't believe this is something that's going to produce traffic.
And looking at what Gavin said originally and what the state law said, we can't treat it any differently than similar uses. When we look at the farm that is in McCandless and the ones that were in McCandless, they bring those types of vehicles in, their trailer trucks going onto their property on a regular basis as it is. Whether it's bringing feed in or bringing a large amount of turkeys in, they are already, that's happening.
Let me ask a quick question. At some point early in the discussion, we said perhaps we should consider a pendant ordinance. What provisions in that, and then I think Gavin or someone else said, gee, we can find ourselves between a rock and a hard place by what that will permit to be done. Are there certain provisions in the pendant ordinance that we think we could advocate that would give us some protection and not lock us in on a bad way, or is it,
What the state's already said.
what's that? Well, that,
Do what the state says, and if we want to work towards something different, instead of automatically locking people out.
Gavin, let me ask you this question. If we said it can go in a C6 district, and we don't have one, would say, pick one out that we could rezone that would meet our requirements?
I don't recommend that.
Okay,
I think that would just be,
another thought.
yeah, no, it's not, it's a
That would be a
creative.
lucky property owner type situation again.
Yeah, and anytime you're creating a zone, I mean, you don't, ideally, you don't have just one property that's C6, as you know. I mean, you try to find an area where it makes sense to have C6 type uses. Not that you guys clearly haven't explored this, over the past decades and haven't found it, but, there probably wouldn't hurt to look again to see if there's some area that would make sense for light industrial type. And we're not talking about putting in, you know, a steelworks like a J&L or something, but, you know, something that would permit those type of uses that would allow an area, and this would be a great fit in there, I think. But again, that's easier said than done, but I understand what council's saying. We'll just look
Would
at
the potential pending ordinance that we've been talking in very general terms about be an ordinance that was essentially parallel to what's in the state's draft?
No, it's more restrictive.
Okay, I mean, do we have some sense of what restrictions we would want to see that wouldn't box us in a way that we?
Well, I think he has them on this, number 6 is, medical marijuana may not be located within 1,000 feet of a property line of a public park or place of worship. That's not in the state's,
No, it's 5, 6, and 7 down.
no, 6.
Six.
I'm not,
Under section.
Yeah, aside from that, the only other
yeah, I think it's.
thing
Well,
that
it's
this
section 10 or
accomplishes,
9. 10 and 9.
Yes.
aside from that provision that Mr. Wilkowskis just referenced, the only other thing this accomplishes is trying to determine, you know, all right, we know these uses are permitted because the state says you can do them. We at the town council are saying, all right, dispensaries make sense in C2 or C3 and C4 districts. So that's a restriction on, you know, a greater restriction on what's at the state law level. And then for growing and processing plants, we're saying, all right, it's not a real good match with any of our uses. So we're saying, all right, maybe closest to being a farm, so it's a farm with these additional restrictions on it. Also not in the state law. So you're taking a state law and you're trying to restrict it to say, all right, we know it's permitted, here's where we think it would make most sense in McCandless. But what I'm hearing certainly is that council's not agreeing that at least right now, is where it makes the most sense. So it sounds like we're back to the drawing board on that, at least on the
Yeah,
growing processing.
we just don't want farms, since they're going into R1 or R2. And also, but since we're talking about public parks or place of worship, do you think we should maybe add rehab centers or rehab facilities?
I think the more you add that's not in the state law, the more likely it is that you're gonna get challenged and the less likely you're gonna be able to successfully defend your ordinance.
Okay.
And I'd be for just totally striking 6 altogether, not being any stricter on it at all. Because
Yeah.
if you can have a pharmacy with narcotics next to
Right,
all of these
OxyContin's
places.
worse than medical marijuana.
Marijuana is, that seems a little hypocritical to me. I mean, you can't even compare what's in a regular pharmacy to medical marijuana.
And that's certainly safer from a legal perspective, so fully, if that's what council's will is,
Yeah,
you're better
I mean,
off.
that's just,
Well,
I can go either
some
way, I
people,
don't care, but.
some people want it one way and some people want it the other way. So we can leave that for now, but do we want to go over this on some technical stuff? Do we want to go through this draft or do we want to just leave it with Toby and us and Bruce to find an alternative to, a district?
Let's see what they can find.
Okay. Well, we can look too.
Just a quick question. I think we're all pretty clear about the, I can't remember the name of it right now, the Academic Clinical Research Center in the I-Zone, the way it's
Yeah.
described
Right.
with the medical training facility.
Mhm.
Okay. That sounds like
Yes, there's no question about
there's
it.
no disagreement there. And there's a question about whether, is there any question about dispensaries being in a C4?
No,
I didn't hear him. I think we're okay there, Mr. Chairman.
yeah.
C3, there seemed to be some discussion.
Yeah, there's some decision. I want to look at RC because C3's, it bothers me.
Well, with the rest of the council here, the RC zone was designed so that the R is residential, the C is commercial, was to respect both and have them cohabitate in a way that is not offensive, especially to the residential part. So
Would you find this offensive?
I don't know. I think people, I personally, I don't think it's important what I think about that. I think it's more important what the people in the R part of the zone think.
And the
I'm
RC
not so
would
sure they'd be happy to have, if we're trying to respect residential in R1 and
Well-
R2 throughout the rest of the town, I think the same thing would apply.
Well, I am
RC.
trying to respect residential in the rest of the time on certain areas. There's certain areas where the C3 is right in smack on the edge or right across from residential.
Okay, I think we should look at those, and we should look at those more carefully.
Yeah,
Okay, so our C3 is not a given.
it's not given.
Okay, and we know what to do about the last part, the processor and farm. So yeah, it is not council's will, I don't think, certainly to have anything at the end of this month, but for us to keep charging, bring something back for the next zoning committee, Mr. Chairman? So
Yeah, that'd
give me
be
status
good. Yeah,
report?
yeah.
And I know you'll be involved, because
Yeah.
we'll be talking to you about it.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I'll leave my detailed comments for later then.
We can talk about it.
Okay.
That'd be good. That'd be helpful.
Yeah. The next item on the agenda is report on status of Park Edge 2 land development restoration of existing building on site and sidewalk installation. Bruce, you'll have to elaborate on that because I just was told, you know.
Two things. The developer, Don Pohl, as you know, this went on for several months, and we finally settled on a plan that the town thought would work the best. When Mr. Pohl started looking at the building that was there, he found that there was a very solid house built within that structure. So he came back to me with the idea that I would like to leave that house. I'm going to tear down about a third of the exoskeleton of that building. He said within it there are 4-cell blocks at the foundation level, and there are 2x8 studs above it, 2x8 walls above that, and a hardwood floor on the second floor. That was a residential structure at one time. It was a combination of residential and commercial later on. So anyways, he wants to leave that, and I want to report that to town council. He has also, in another development that he did, he found a building that was a part of the golf course. It was the clubhouse of a golf course, and he converted that into a real nice residential structure. So he has some experience in doing those kind of things. And in fact, in that clubhouse, in the house that he converted, the keystones in the trim had golf clubs cut into them. And that was, he was able to keep those in the trim, the old wide trim in the window. So he did a great job. He has some experience. That way, none of that goes back into, a lot of that won't go back into a landfill. So it's gonna have some great environmental aspects to it in order to keep.
So that nobody's surprised that there's not 5 new houses, the idea is
There'll be 4 and
a
1
restored house.
restored house, yes. So I wanted to do that. The second part of that is that Mr. Pohl has received his comments from the county, and surprisingly, they want to take over his stormwater pipe. Remember the stormwater pipe where everything was discharging into from the 5 houses? And they want to take that over. However, he also has to put in PennDOT approved catch basins. And as that road is a narrow road, they don't want those catch basins in the drive lane. They want them offset. So they're gonna be offset. And he's gonna have to do probably a little bit of grading to do that. However, they also said that we do not want, their initial comment is, and we haven't resolved this yet, it's still being discussed, I just want to point it out to council, they do not want the sidewalks in the right of way. And if you look at that, there'd be a significant amount of grading, there's gonna be a significant amount of grading just to get them, the sidewalks in to begin with the exception of where this existing house is. So,
These sidewalks would not be required at the existing house, correct?
they're already there. So he's gonna probably have to.
Wrapped
reroute it.
around, because when that be
It
the
doesn't
ones
wrap,
that
it
wrap.
doesn't wrap around, it just comes across the front. So, but anyways, it's gonna take a significant amount of work if it has to be out of the right of way. It's gonna take a significant amount of work if it is in the right of way, but it's gonna be even worse. It's gonna really shrink the building area of the lots. So we haven't resolved that yet, I just wanna keep everybody informed as to where we're at with that.
Just the one
Bruce, that
fact-
Kotobuki house, excuse me, I'll be real
Yes.
quick, Toby. The Kotobuki house will effectively be on the corner of the other 4?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So there's one factoid for council to understand, and make sure I understand too, is these catch basins that the county wants, which will be outboard of the paved area, not in the paved area.
Right, there'll be an offset.
It's now gonna push the buffer area, this drain pipe and the sidewalk now back an additional several feet, is that right?
I'm
that's
thinking 3 feet,
That's gonna cause some additional grading?
correct.
Okay.
Well,
So but you know, there was, the argument Mr. Paul was trying to make, that there was extensive grading, so I think if it's just, he's gonna have to demonstrate what kind of burden it's become if he wants to come back and ask for a waiver of some sort.
right, the way we worded the motion is he has to come back to council for that.
Right.
We did recognize that the county may not want it, and I haven't received definitively that the county doesn't want it. We're not there yet, so we've had some discussion, I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. But that's where we're at with it.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Any comments from council? Any comments from the public on any of this? Okay.
Very little sidewalk. And it
Yeah.
goes into the parking lot. So we're basically saying you have to leave 30 feet of sidewalk.
Where does it begin, Steve?
The only sidewalk is from the front door of the Kotobuki. We can measure it actually.
What street is this right here?
This is Ridge, this is the one that goes past the police station.
That's Kotobuki right
That's
there?
Kotobuki, this is
Those
the
would
old
be taken
Babcock
out in
Trail.
frontage, right, that's
Yes.
out
It
in
bends
that.
here,
Yes, and on the
Way.
side.
That's not much of a sidewalk.
49 feet. But
Yeah,
you
there
know
will be
that he
nothing
would be
protruding in it
required
right away.
to leave.
About a third of the building.
Should we close the meeting?
Yeah, I'll close it. The zoning committee meeting hereby adjourned.
Call to order the Finance and Personnel Committee. First thing will be a presentation of reports by Manning and Napier and AMCO Consulting on the fourth quarter 2017 and January 2018 investment performance of the uniformed and non-uniformed defined benefit pension plans.
Not as exciting as the last topic, but I'll try to keep it brief. Does everyone have the January reports? I'm going to focus primarily on the police pension plan. And if we go to tab 3, page number 21 of 42, and the subsequent 2 pages, 22 and 23. Actually on page 22, again, 23 shows the quarter return, which was 1.65% before fees, 1.55% after fees. That was a light, obviously a positive quarter, but behind our benchmarks. So it was a underperforming quarter. But if you look on the top, on the right-hand side of page 22, it closed out a year in which we outperformed our benchmarks and had very strong positive absolute returns for the full year. So we had 3 very good quarters to start the year. It's not unusual to have a light quarter every once in a while through that in that fourth quarter. The markets did get a little bit frothy towards the end of the year with a lot of excitement driving prices up, and we did not participate nearly as strongly, but we still had good positive returns. If you look on page 21, as we've talked about in the last few reports, we have been, as the stock prices have been getting higher and higher, we have been getting a little bit more cautious. We're in the 9th year of a bull market. It has been our opinion that stocks are relatively expensive when compared to history, and it's a time when you need to start focusing a little bit more on preserving your assets when the market does get difficult. So we had been reducing our equity allocation. As you can see on page 21, the pie chart, at the end of the year, there was just under 50% of the portfolio in stocks, which is about 13 or 14 percentage points lower than it was 5 years ago. So we've been slowly, over the last 5 years, reducing our equity allocation. And obviously this report's only through December 31st. There's been a lot of volatility in the market in the last 2 weeks. That relatively conservative position has helped out as the markets have gotten volatile, as the market fell back from its peak of January 26th through last week, just over 10%. So it's technically in the realm of a correction. Being lower in equity allocation helped our performance in that time period. Our stocks that we own did a little bit better than the broad market, and the bonds that we own did a little bit better than the broad market. So the broad stock market lost about 10% from peak to end of last week. The bond market lost about 2% from that same time period as interest rates started moving up. And the stocks that the bonds that we own in your portfolio only lost about 0.75%. So we added value in each of the 3 areas where we can add value: in the stocks that we own, in the bonds that we own, and in our mix of stocks and bonds. Modestly at this point, but that's the kind of volatility that we've been starting to prepare the portfolio for. At this point, we don't know if that volatility is necessarily over. It seems like things have calmed down, particularly the last 2 days. The volume has come down, the volatility has come down a bit, and we can hope that it's over with. But ultimately, only having come down about 10%, stocks are still a little bit overvalued, and we are still in a cycle where we're moving from a very accommodative monetary policy, where the central bank built up a very, very large balance sheet. They have started over the last 2 years unwinding that balance sheet, and we've never been through a cycle where there's been that large of a balance sheet that needed to be unwound. So we remain cautious. We did buy a few stocks last week in the turmoil. Generally speaking, we like, we think volatility can help an active manager, as we can sort through everything that's being tossed about by the markets and find opportunities and bargains. At this point, we found a few, but really haven't changed the overall perspective and weighting of the portfolio. So, any questions?
No, I mean, now it's turned around for active management. It was previously, before, say 2016, was for passive management, and now it seems to be turning around.
Generally speaking, the environment of the time period, the last 4 or 5 years, 2012 to 2015, 2016, has been a very difficult time for almost all active managers. Correlations were very high across the market. It was, and the large cap sector of the market tended to lead the market. And it's difficult for an active manager to add value in that kind of environment. It does seem that some of those trends have changed. The correlation has come down. The volatility, up until just recently, volatility was very, very low over last year. But we and other active managers have started to outperform, as I've laid out for you. We had a difficult end of 2014 and 3 quarters of 2015 that continues to be in the numbers, and make comparisons over the last 3, 5, and 10 years look not particularly strong versus our benchmark. But we've now put together a string of a very 3 out of 4 good quarters, a good quarter building this quarter. For the previous year, we had 3 out of 4 good quarters. So we seem to be on a better track now.
Any other questions?
I have a question just in general. With the markets,
He's on our police pension board.
Okay.
Officer McChesney.
So with the markets doing so well over the past year, and more so with the volatility recently, would it be wise for us to commission the actuarial study again, to do it on a yearly basis instead of doing it once every 2 years? Since things have changed so much within the last year, would that give us a better reading of where we stand?
As Toby's pointing out, I mean, that the law is set to do it once every 2 years.
Okay, we can't do that more often?
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just a real quick question. Did you make a comparison? I had it sitting here in all this paper I had between the year end and January 31st, the performances.
I did not,
Well, you had to be affected by the events of January, right?
well, January was a good
February.
month. It was
Yeah.
since, it
February.
was since
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
February that has been poor. And I calculated on the back of an envelope, I had to add back in some of the cash flow because there's money taken out of the fund every month to pay benefits. It looks like the January 31st closed with 15,973,000 in the fund. As of Friday's close of business, it was at 15,280,890. But adding back in about $78,000 of distributions from the fund that happened since January 31st, it would have been about 15,359,000. That would have been a return of minus 3.84% for that 9-day period, 6 or 7 market days. The S&P 500 over that time period was down just under 8%. And the bond market was down just under 1%. So better than the benchmark over that time frame.
If you look at the inception, from the very beginning,
Yeah,
the world in the very beginning, those numbers still are pretty reasonable numbers, aren't they? In terms,
I believe so. Yes.
Switch. Justin.
Good evening. I will also be respectful of council's time, and I believe the reports are, December ending reports were distributed electronically. I do have, if anyone needs a copy.
Veronica,
If someone
Veronica.
needs to, yeah,
If you have, you might as well pass them around, we just can see who's.
thank you. I have 2 more here, if we need them.
and I will piggyback on a handful of Dave's comments and then try to shed some other observations. I will move very quickly and only reference a few pages. If you wouldn't mind opening the report, actually to page 7. Dave talked about Manning and Napier, and they're shifting their asset allocation over the last few years to a more conservative positioning as they see stock price valuations rising as equity markets have done quite well. And if you look at this graph on page 7, you can see the shift in allocation. If you look at the date, if you look at the sort of horizontal time frame, and if you wind up to what would be 3/14 or the end of the first quarter of 2014, the blue and the gray, that represents your equity exposure, blue being domestic, and the gray being international equity. It would have equaled about 64% of total plan assets, and you can see that that is shifted over time towards a more conservative allocation, ending the year at about 48% equity. So this has been a bit of a contrarian allocation. We've been in a very low bond yield environment, low interest rate environment, and I'll tie this in at the very end. In a low rate environment, a lot of other investors have increased their risk profile simply because with bond yields so low, they've increased their equity allocations. Manning and Napier, being a bit of a contrarian manager, has done the exact opposite, which should be benefiting the plan, especially with what we've seen after January 26th with the increase in market volatility. And Dave referenced a few numbers. If you wouldn't mind, page 10, and to Councilman McKim and to our police representative, maybe the most important number is on this page, and it's that since inception return, or since Manning and Napier was hired, and that's on the lower right, growing at an annualized rate of 8.16%. And you can see some other information on this page. When they took over, 6.8 million in assets, 2.1 million cash flow negative, and investment gains of around 11 million. That's how we end up with our $15.6 million ending market value. And just for the year 2017 calendar year, cash flow out, it's not on this page, but cash flow out was 282,000. Investment gains were around 2 million.
Cash flow out is benefits paid.
Yes.
That's benefits paid.
And then quickly, page 13, I know there's a little more return information on this page than in the Manning and Napier report, but I'll just focus on the sort of the top line, which is the total fund. And again, probably the most important number to reference, you go to the far right, that inception return, 8.16. That does outperform policy index as well as other plans in the universe, and that ranking would indicate that the police pension plan has outperformed roughly 87% of other public plans over that time period. Dave referenced the quarter with the underperformance, 1.65. I don't need to sort of reiterate any of those numbers. It was the only underperforming quarter that they had in 2017. Year to date, the 1 year time period being calendar year 2017, virtually a median experience relative to other plans, but outperforming the policy index by 1.76%. And then I'm just going to conclude on page 15. I don't know if you've read everything in advance. Then I'm going to take some of the language from that final paragraph. We talked about certainly underperformance from Manning and Napier in 2014 as well as 2015, which is one reason why we've been critical in keeping a very close eye on them. Their performance turned around for the most part in 2016, other than one quarter, and then we saw that again this year, outperforming over the first 3 quarters. Again, giving up some of the gains in the 4th quarter relative to the benchmark, but still, all in all, an outperforming year. So the trend has been positive, and the long-term history has been positive, so we wouldn't recommend any changes at this point. And I will tie in one last comment that last week we saw the S&P 500 off 5.1%. Probably the most significant thing that we've witnessed this year from an investment standpoint is a significant rise in interest rates. So the 10-year Treasury yield has gone from 2.4% to 2.86%. So one, bonds and bond prices have an inverse relationship to fixed income. So when rates rise, you'll often see losses in the bond market. And Manning and Napier, the other thing is a lot of risk assets, equities are actually priced off of what's happening with the 10-year Treasury. So higher interest rates usually start to bring down equity market valuations. The point is, I think Manning and Napier sort of expected a market environment, and they were early on this call, and it did cause some issues, but I think they expected and positioned your portfolio for increased equity volatility as we saw valuations rise, but also for higher and rising interest rates as well as inflation. And we have not seen that, certainly did not see any of that in 2016. We have witnessed it this year, and in particular over the last 10, 14 trading days. So a lot of what they were expecting that we didn't see last year and perhaps years prior, we're starting to see now. So they sort of positioned the portfolio, I think, to perhaps take advantage of the market environment. So we've seen enough positive trend from the portfolio over the last several quarters. And I think what we're seeing in the markets with a little bit of disruption should line up with what they've been expecting. So I think that's certainly a reason to continue without making a change at this time.
Any questions from council?
Thank you.
Okay. Number 3. Discuss the allocation of 25% of the 2017 regional asset district RAD proceedings that exceed the amount received in 2016, which is $1,909.81, in accordance with Act 77 of 1993 of the Intergovernmental Cooperative Laws of Pennsylvania, as before we adopted resolution, whatever the number would be, 2008.
Reed, do you have a comment, any comment?
Doesn't look like it.
You don't have to, I mean,
I can.
is anybody, is there a question how this is calculated for anybody?
Am I right that we get so much RAD money each year, and if we get so much percentage more from one year from the last year, then we have to take a certain percentage of that and put it in something from the
Yes.
COG?
We get RAD money every month, and if in a given year, the RAD funds we receive are greater than the prior year, we must put 25% of that increase, we must disperse it to an intergovernmental organization, like the North Hills Council of Governments or the Northland Library.
And I'm correct in that there's only 2 of those that McCandless has, right? And that's the COG and the library,
That's all I'm aware of.
is that correct?
And the library was, we have given to both. The council over the years has kind of alternated. And the library was formed before intergovernmental cooperation laws existed. But it's been deemed by them and by the RAD board that libraries are recipients. We're doing one last check to see if there's any
Anything
prohibition for some reason.
Well, we're just gonna double check. I mean, the COG is clearly 100%, it's okay to give it to them. The library, because of, as Toby said, is not exactly formed under that law that's referenced in the RAD legislation, so we're just gonna do a quick confirmation to make sure it's okay to give it there.
Okay, because we've given money to the library before.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And we did on the basis that it was formed before these intergovernmental laws.
So we have to give this money to somebody.
One of those two.
What's gonna determine that? I guess I was just looking earlier today at the organization was created under the intergovernmental cooperation laws of the Commonwealth. You're suggesting that this may not be an appropriate vehicle to use, because at least you wanna confirm that it is.
Correct. I'm not suggesting that it's not, but it wasn't formed under the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act. And, you know, I think RAD monies regularly go to libraries like this, and in fact, I think other municipalities around here give to this particular library. So I don't think it's gonna be an issue, we just
I
wanna
mean,
be.
it could be wrong, it's possible that it's wrong.
It's true, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean we should be doing it too, so we're just gonna confirm.
Yeah, we'll find out,
Okay,
thank you.
so do we want to decide now that if we confirm that, who we want to give the money to, or do
That
we
would
want
be
to
good,
wait?
because
till-
that way,
Yeah.
Marie can prepare the ordinance.
Yeah,
or the
so,
resolutions.
I know our libraries need some repairs. So my recommendation would be to give it to the library if it's an acceptable source. What do
Madam
you
Chairman, do we need a motion for that?
You can't. make a
We
motion
can't
yet.
make any
You
motion.
can't.
You can give your indication.
Oh, you can't now, I'm with you, wrong day.
She's
I'm
taking a
with you.
poll.
Yeah. And
I
then-
feel the same way.
and then-
If somebody wanted me to vote, but I can't.
And then that way we could have a resolution that would be prepared.
Right.
And so we could vote at the meeting based on that. So our
Right.
first choice would be the library, okay, and then if not, then we'll give it to the COG. Okay,
Who did we give it to last year?
the library,
Library.
Okay.
okay. Next, review the check listing number 2 dated January 11th, 2018 through February 7th, 2018, totaling $979,175.76 is submitted to each member of council and posted on the bulletin board as well as in the supporting documents on the website. Any questions about the list of bills?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just one, the last page, page 1 of 2, the, appears to be tax refunds or tax revenues, Maiello and Brungo, to the tune of about $19,000. Can you just explain that briefly?
Sure, we're required by law to turn over any unpaid North Allegheny School District real estate taxes to their delinquent collector. This year, we had to do it on January 8th. We still have taxpayers in the town who submit a payment to the town for both the town and school district taxes. And we don't return the check to the taxpayer. We don't just keep our money and refund the rest of the taxpayer. We forward the overpayment to Maiello, Brungo, and Maiello. Because that's the intent of the taxpayer, is to pay both the town and school district taxes.
Okay. Thank you.
I noticed we had like a whole slew of void checks.
Yeah, that was my doing. Linda Grinick, our tax administrator, retired in January, and this was the first time that we attempted without her to run the real estate refund checks. There are 3 to a sheet, individual sheets,
Okay.
and we weren't sure if
User
it was face up, face down,
Okay.
pointing away, pointing toward, back to front, front to back,
All right.
so we figured it out.
Okay, all right. I just saw them, I thought, I figured it was something like that.
Luckily, we only ordered 1 supply of checks, that was back in 2004, and we probably have enough to last us another 20 years, so we're okay.
Okay, all right. Any other questions from council about the bills? Okay, number 5, notification that a resignation has been received from Jim Wallert as a member of McCandless Town Sanitary Authority. Such resignation to be taken upon appointment of his replacement. So there are 2 other people who interviewed that are in your packet there. So what we were thinking about doing is looking those over, and at the meeting on Monday, someone making a nomination to place one of those, I think they're both gentlemen. Yeah,
Yes.
one of those gentlemen in that position.
So the meeting 2 Mondays from now?
2 Mondays,
Oh.
yes. We have no meeting next Monday. Don't show up next Monday. We have no meeting. So I think that's how we're gonna handle that, since both of those were very qualified people who have been interviewed. Any questions about that at all? Okay. Number 6, a recommendation of an ordinance to adopt at council's regular business meeting approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as part of the various component codes or the codified ordinances of the town of McCandless. And this is just the formality of codifying ordinances that were adopted last year. All right, and we have to have an ordinance for that. Any questions about that at all?
And the other minor point to add is that there are ordinances of lasting value. This is ordinance that has just one-time significance, they are not codified.
Oh,
But
okay.
ordinances that have lasting value can be, have to pertain townwide.
Mhm.
It's not everyone, it's almost everyone.
And that's what's, that book right there that Carolyn has. That's what that is. Any questions about that at all?
So that book is current up to 12, 13, 17?
That book, the current book
Yeah.
is, the next ordinance is 15. Is in early 2015, so this is 2 years worth of work. We hardly had.
Yeah, it's current.
Oh, yeah, the changes that you'll have to put into your book will be
Okay.
current through the last ordinance was passed in December. Yes.
So,
Thank you, I'm sorry, I
no,
misunderstood.
that's no problem.
Number 7, seminars and conferences.
Just a reminder that we have the Allegheny League of Municipalities conference, very good conference that occurs in the beginning of April. It's the 5th through the 8th of April. We have reservations made for those so far who have requested. And then,
Did I say I was going?
not yet.
I'm definitely going. I may have a second later, but
Okay, so how would you like, you tell me later. How you like, got you down. Other than that,
Update me on this Vesteller conference. Vesteller? Looks like 4 people went to Vesteller conflict management. That was in the bills.
Bill would have
Police perhaps?
What's that?
the Vestler conference.
Vestler
Not me.
Conference, Conflict Management.
I thought you were the one who went to the conference.
Do you have the,
The
check number on
that?
Not me.
No one here attended, then couldn't really give me an update, but I just wonder who went.
If you have the check number, it's got the account number right next to it.
Yeah, I had just written it in my book.
It likely was police,
The
I would
police,
think, by the
okay,
sound of it.
okay.
Sounds like police.
All right, it was a conflict management for contact professionals. There were 3 reservations. I just wondered
That was
who
nice.
went.
It was likely police.
The police, okay, all right. Sounded interesting, I just wanted to hear about it. Okay, at this point, we take public comment.
Quick question. When do we say that we're gonna vote on the replacement for Mr. Wallert?
In 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, thank you.
At the business meeting, right?
Business meeting.
Right.
We'll put a blank on the agenda, and then so council
Somebody can-
will nominate someone.
How's he doing, Bill? Is he,
Yes.
Madam President, will you be
If
taking
you-
comments after your report, because it's, my comments are more germane to your agenda item?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can do that. Any other comments that have pertain to the Finance and Personnel Committee? Okay. All right. Since we're not having an agenda meeting this month, there were just a couple of things that I wanted to go over in my report. And one of those, I think I'm trying to standardize all the committee meetings that we go to. I'm trying to standardize a report. We've been kind of giving kind of a little bit of a haphazard report, verbal report, as we can kind of remember at the agenda review meeting. I'd like to have something a little bit more formal, and I kind of pass that around for everyone to look at. You wouldn't have to use that form, but I do think we need something in writing that we can put on the website so people can look at, and that we'll have for posterity. If you're going like to the ambulance service or whatever, you can look on their website, and maybe, I don't know if they post their minutes, but to find those, but since we're attending those, we need to have some kind of record of that. So that's what this is about, the standardizing the liaison report. I'm happy to say that we are going forward, keep 5 years worth of meeting documents on the website. So we're hoping that'll cut down some on the right to know, and if people want to reference anything, they can look back. We're not going to go back and put in the last 4 years, but we have last year's on there, and then moving forward, we're going to keep 5 years instead of deleting them every year. So I think that's going to be very positive. I think
Sorry. I
yes,
bet you-
was there something else?
Whenever you're done with that, I have just a quick comment to add about liaison.
Go ahead.
If the liaison, the agenda review agenda regarding liaisons, as you know, is prepared for the 3rd Monday. So if we have reports, it would be helpful for Marie to be able to compile them. If you would please, the Thursday before the 3rd Monday. So that,
This,
no, there's none this
Oh,
month.
yeah, right.
But just whenever we have an agenda review,
Okay.
we'll send out a reminder.
Okay.
We'll send- So that you can, she can scan them in and
Okay.
make a comprehensive document.
I actually even put that on there the Thursday before, if you'd like to have that.
Sounds like,
Yep. Don't
The
scare
vibes
me.
were there.
Don't scare me. Okay, anything else about that? Okay, just trying to keep us organized and so people can actually see what's going on. Last thing is review the town council's appointment policy. We just got a letter last week, I think it was, and then we, from a citizen, and then we got a letter back in December questioning the appointment policy. So, having gotten 2 formal letters to council, I thought maybe we could pull this up and take a look at this and see if there are any changes that we need to make to this. Do we need to amend it? Do we want to, what we want to do with this? So, the general complaints seem to be about council members holding positions on boards. Or I'll use an example of Carolyn and Bill. They're on the Environmental Advisory Committee, but when they were elected onto council, that they have decided to give up those seats so a citizen can have those seats, and because of all their other council duties. So these letters were brought up saying that we should actually have a formal policy that says that council members should not be on. Now, some boards, the board specifically says a council member has to be on the board, and I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the other citizen boards. So I'm interested in,
Well, what about if the council member is the only one that applies?
then I think if they're the only one that applies, that should
Yeah,
be an
yeah, it has to be
exception too.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other, what are you all thinking about that?
I don't have a problem with it.
I don't have a problem
I don't
with it.
know.
You don't have a problem
We'll
with
have to
that?
certainly make the wording so that if the council person, if there's nobody else interested in the position, a council person can be on it.
Okay. Well, if we, so do we want to change it so that council members do not hold positions, or we label these as citizen positions and therefore are not available to council members? Or, what do we, or do we wanna keep it how it is?
Well, what about the case where there's only the council member wants the position?
Well, I think that would be an exception.
Okay.
I think that, but excluding that,
Do we
Okay.
have that? We don't have a problem right now for anyone.
well, we got a letter last week, someone who was unhappy with that, and we got a letter.
But we don't have any council members on any of these boards right now.
Yes, we do.
Oh, do we? Okay.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have, Bill is on the MIDA, and, Joan is on the library.
What about all these other committees, like the planning commission, Greg, zoning hearing board, Greg?
He's the liaison.
Okay, so you're excluding, an actual member, is that what you're talking about?
On the committee, a member of the committee.
Member of the committee.
I knew it would come down to this.
No, I'm just looking at, Greg, I'm not picking on you, I just have to have a list here.
No,
No, but he,
All right, Keith.
but he's the liaison, he's not a voting
Okay.
member.
Right,
Well, I think the only thing that I'm on is the MIDA, I don't think there's anything else I'm a member of.
right, that's what she said.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so what does council think
I
about
would
this?
totally
Yeah, I
agree
would go
that
for it. Yeah, I could.
we ought to change it and make the wording, if no one else is interested, then a council person can, what,
Can be
do it for a year
Other,
until?
unless
Do you wanna
otherwise,
do it?
unless otherwise specifically stated by the board. Now, this is something that I just put together, you tell me, unless otherwise specifically stated by the board, that a council member must hold the position, all committees, boards, authorities shall be resident positions and not be available to council members unless no resident applies.
And then my question is, do they get the full term, or do you do that by annually?
They could do it for a full term unless, if someone applied for the position, then,
So you could, we would have to say this position is being held by,
or maybe we
Kim
could, or
Zachary
maybe
or
we could
something.
announce it every year.
We have talked about the workload of interviewing, and I've
oh,
already
I
checked.
know it's a pain in the butt.
No,
but-
there's not so much a pay, it's just time, it's just the time.
Yeah.
There were 9 vacancies last year, and there were gonna be 11 this coming year. So I think if you're gonna appoint someone, and there may be certain appointment periods. For example, when you appoint someone to the zoning hearing board, it's supposed to be for 3 years. 40 boards or 5. I think you have to look at the case, because it might be an unfulfilled a term that's not completed,
Right.
a vacancy.
Well, it might be, yeah.
So then you could probably just sort of finish the term out, that'd be the best thing to do.
Yeah, that would be,
Is anybody not in compliance now? I mean,
You and Joey.
No, I am in compliance. I thought,
No, not if we do this.
well, you said I'm in the MIDA.
Right.
Right.
What's the other one? What else am I
That's
on?
it.
You're
That's
on
it. That's the
MIDA,
only one.
Joanne's on the
Right, we're
library.
liaison, but we're not talking
We're
about
not
that.
talking about
But
that.
you said, so I am in compliance. I thought you just said I wasn't in
I
compliance.
thought you were on a committee.
You are on the MIDA,
Yeah, the one committee.
right.
I thought you're allowed to be in one, right?
We're saying that we would rather that the council members were not, and that
At all, period.
Right. That's what we're
unless
talking
there's
about.
no
Other
one
than as liaison-
interested.
Other than liaisons.
You could be a
Right, other than
liaison, but
liaison.
you wouldn't be a voting member of that.
Well, I'm already elected voting member of that as a
So
secretary.
when your term expires, then
Well, I've been reelected on that,
you have,
yeah.
that wouldn't happen again under this policy. You finish out this term.
That's a multi-year term, I believe.
It's a 5-year term, so when this term expires, you'd be the last one to leave it.
Don't worry about it in 5 years, but it's okay to be on there. I thought you had.
It's
it.
okay, I mean, Joe,
No, I
or
understand.
Carolyn and Bill
Madam
chose
Chair.
to
Yes.
resign for theirs.
Would this stand up to a challenge? Are we permitted under law to legally exclude someone by virtue of their elected office, or would this have to be managed the way we do now as a council when we make the appointment?
You could have a policy, you could have a policy essentially self-governing that you're not gonna have council people take those spots. That's okay to do.
Okay.
Now, of course, that's always subject to change by a majority vote of council, so anytime, the real practical answer is if a majority vote of council wants to put a councilman back on there, you change the policy and you can do it,
I see.
so.
Okay.
Well, now, there's another one on here, that, I mean, I'm just looking through the list that we were given when we, at the beginning of this year, the Heritage Center promotion, that had Joanne and alternate Bill Kirk, is that,
Liaison.
what's that?
You're not a member of the
Oh,
board.
that's all liaison, okay. Okay,
We
so,
kind of had some extra people on there as we're kind of getting that
Yeah.
up and going, because those people kind of been involved before, so that's just kind of get that kind of bolstered up a little bit. But I could have missed one, but those were the only two that I'm aware of.
And myself.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm also a member of the MTSA board still. I retain my board membership there. My
Okay.
term, it runs out in 2 years, and because we've lost so many members, we just lost another, and so the average, term, I guess you'd call it, tenure of the members is declining rapidly, and we have so many long-term issues that I offered to stay on. For continuity's sake, we're facing a consent decree, and some plant expansions that,
But that's
But I
not an
would be-
appointment from council,
I believe we are.
was
No.
it?
It was a previous.
Yes, it was previous appointment, yes.
Okay,
It was 2 years ago.
okay.
Yeah, I plan to not, seek another term, or I would not take another term, but I'm just
So
finishing it
you
out.
would agree with instituting a policy?
Yes, and as long as I think we could grandfather those terms out, we create unnecessary vacancies and, unplanned vacancies, that's all.
so
Okay.
it would be anything that is I only have the one, I mean, I'm not,
Yeah, you have one, I missed Bill's, Joanne has one, and Bill
but it
has
has
one.
nothing to do with the committees, the actual committees on council, right?
No.
Right,
But,
it does
I'm
not.
not a chair of any committee anyway, so I have nothing there, and I have a couple of, I guess I'm vice chair for a couple of things. But those have nothing to do with, there's
Right,
only,
it's different.
the liaisons are not, and it's committee, the way this is written out, and I think, I don't know, prepared to say, boards, commissions, and committee liaisons, what does that include in there? Then, the list here.
Everything below there.
Well, but some of those things aren't included in the prohibition, are they, or is it?
Seems to be a
The
wrong.
liaison, if you're a liaison,
You aren't voting.
Yeah.
yeah,
We made Toby and I just put together a list, we sent it out, but then we made some changes on it, so
Yeah.
I don't know if we've sent out the latest one.
Needs to go
And it
out.
tells you whether you're a voting member or
Yeah.
not. There's a couple of the boards
Yeah.
that you are a voting member, you're not a liaison, and that's different.
okay, well, like,
There's two of them, I think,
Yes.
that you're.
The
now that-
COG and the joint rec.
Yeah, those two you're actually, and that's how that was set up in the
What's the North
charter.
Pittsburgh Community Development Corporation? Am I a liaison to that? Is that what I am there? I mean, I've never attended it. Nobody seems to know what they do.
In that case, well, I think that liaison policy shows that that board member, it's dormant, but when it gets active, it does nice work.
But I am a liaison. Is that what I am?
Your liaison, you would also serve as a board member unless, I think you're the only person who's appointed, so you automatically would be a
Well,
voting member.
If I can't,
You can't, so you would be a voting member of that board, should they be convened.
should they ever reconvene some years from now?
Could be.
I mean, they haven't,
More, could be.
yeah, okay.
Something, some issue comes up.
But that one's okay. It's good. I'm perfectly willing to give that up to somebody else.
You got a 2-year term to that, she already said that.
All right, okay, fine. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about
Actual board,
the North Pittsburgh
sanitary
Community.
board, the MIDA, is
And
another
development.
authority, and the library.
Okay. But what did you say about the library?
Library is an authority position, so
Well,
that
am
would
I
fall
on the-
into this category.
No, Julian is.
Yeah, you keep saying the library to me. I'm going to do with the
I
library.
thought you wanted the complete list.
No.
Okay.
Okay,
All
I
right,
think
so
thank you.
are we pretty good with that? All right, so.
Probably with the wording, I
Okay.
didn't,
This is what I said, tell me if you like it or not. Unless otherwise specifically stated by the board, whichever board they're on,
Right.
or the bylaws of that board.
the bylaws of that board.
Okay.
A council member, that a council member must hold the position. All committees, boards, authorities shall be resident positions, not available to council members unless no resident applies.
So, and Marie can get that from the tape, but if you would email that to her
Okay,
or me,
okay,
I'd be,
okay.
appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
There were a couple other things in here that I thought, since we're revisiting this, that we can look at. I don't know what your thoughts are. Number 9 says that the appointed to these positions after June 1st, 2016, can hold no more than 2 appointed positions at a time. We've had so many people apply for positions. Do we want to keep that at 2, or do we want to put it down to 1 unless no one else applies? And
2
then
and
you can
less,
take
right.
2?
That's what I wanted to do when we first did this.
Well, we're looking at it now. This was all new, uncharted
So,
territory when we did it.
Those appointed to positions maybe hold no more than 2
One, we would say.
We would like
no
to
one
switch
for
it back to
one,
1.
Yeah, I would,
Unless no one else,
Yeah,
unless
right.
there is not another applicant.
yeah, I agree with that.
You all like that, that? That just gives a chance for more people to be involved. And we can, grandfather people in, and, so the way this, in my mind, would work is if I had a 2-year term and a 4-year term, that when my 2-year term came up, if that's the one that I wanted to keep, then I would have to resign the 4-year term. Okay, at that time, I would have to make that choice. Is that what everybody's thinking?
Yeah. I hadn't thought about it, but yeah.
And someone suggested to me about this, and I wanna have your feedback, is, they talked about having, term limits on boards. Somebody said 3 consecutive terms. That would be, what did we say, boards are 5 years?
Some boards are 5, some are 3, and some are 4.
Okay, all right. So, someone suggested that now, if a board didn't have anyone applying for it and you'd already had your 3 terms, then of course you could be reappointed. But, that would give some people
But on the
opportunity.
lifelong,
Because if the goal is to get people involved and to serve, and we kind of take turns doing some of that, it might be good to
And get new
rotate some
thinking in.
people through some things. But I want to know what you all thought about that, because
I
that,
love term limits.
I would say, some of those, to limit the guys that are really good, do you want to really do that?
well, maybe we can get some new good people in there.
Right, the
Yeah.
problem is we have not just limited guys that are good, we have taken from guys that are better because we're used to this guy that's done good for 15 years. When we've seen that happen before too.
I have heard people say, there's no reason to even apply if the person who's had the position is applying, because we know we're not gonna get it, because they're gonna give it to the person who's had it. I've overheard that
Oh, I've
several
heard it too.
times.
I think I hear it now.
Yeah, I think you might, you might hear now.
Yes, you are hearing it now.
So anyway, so what do you think
I
about that?
totally agree.
But that's anybody, not just council people, anybody who's
Right.
in any position.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Are you
the
gonna write
difference-
this down so we know what the
Yeah,
rules
I
are?
have it all written down.
All right.
It wouldn't be council people, okay, because council people are elected and have term limits based on their election. So if the public doesn't want you, you're out. But with these appointments, if there are no limits, you can just keep appointing the same person, you know, for 40 years,
Yeah.
when maybe there are some other people who would like to
We'll take the
be
planning
involved
commission,
too.
for example. Did you, what do you, are you on the planning commission?
Yeah.
He's the liaison.
Well, I'm a
You're a
liaison.
liaison.
I'm a liaison.
Have
Would
you
it
been on
apply-
it for
would
40
Would
years?
it apply to liaisons,
It's been on it for
or
2
just
months.
people that actually have a voting?
Yeah, it would be
Well,
people
well, I mean, those guys
who are
are-
appointed positions.
Even if it's a liaison, they don't have any real authority to do anything.
Oh,
No,
no.
liaisons are null and void about this.
Okay.
What are we thinking?
What's the term,
Bill, what do you
what's the
think?
term of a
Planning commission's 4 years.
Like Caesar?
So Madam Chair, by doing this and memorializing it in a term limit, and I support term limits, my only reservation is to ensure that we always have qualified, we come from a community that's very rich in talent and skills, and so we are usurping the power of the council to some degree by forcing the issue. I guess I certainly am supportive of term limits. I would just hope that we would have some type, and I guess the safety valve is that the council could always rescind at some point if in fact we were left with candidates that were maybe not, didn't have the right set of skills to benefit the residents of the town in an important position where perhaps fiduciary responsibilities that would require certain sets of skills, which we've always had in our.
And
If
the
the
fact that the
position
township's
required-
got that many qualified people,
Yes.
I don't think we're gonna get the
If the
town
board,
drunk coming in and doing it.
if the board required that it be an
Suggested.
attorney, then we wouldn't settle for a non-attorney.
Yes.
Because our attorney's term limit, the attorney's term limits.
You
would
see
come.
my point.
Common sense would, I think, dictate that. But
I support
think that's
term
a-
limits
I
is the
think that's a
short
good
answer.
point. Okay.
Okay?
All right, Carolyn,
All right.
yes. Greg, you said yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Bill, you still
Yes, ma'am.
thinking? Okay. So those would be those 3 changes, and I'll
Help
get
us
them
with the words.
specifically to you, and then they'll be in your folder for next. If they look okay, then we could. I guess we would be a. What would it be?
We would put an
An
amendment to this
amendment.
resolution.
That's what it is. Amendment to resolution.
Do we have a problem with people attending these things, participating, the various boards, these people that are gonna be on them or are on them now? Do we perceive there's any problem with people missing a lot of meetings or that sort of thing?
When we re-interview someone, it's at that point, in fact, I'm looking for which, when we were reappointing, will be considered by town council with the applicant and the council liaison and the council committee chair. And we put that in there, if you remember, Bill, so that if somebody wasn't participating in the meetings, wasn't showing up
Is
to
that
the
what you
meetings.
just read? Is that what that says?
Yeah, yes.
Read that again to me,
And
the
number
point that
8,
doesn't.
reappointments will be considered by town council
Okay,
upon consultation with the applicant,
okay.
the council liaison, or council committee chair as applicable.
Okay.
So we put that in there.
Well, that doesn't say, if you missed 5 out of 10 meetings that you shouldn't be on.
No, but that's what we're consulting them about. For example, if we had.
You don't want a hard and fast rule, is that what you're saying?
Right, and if somebody in the EAC kept missing the meetings, and then they came up to be reappointed, and then we consulted with Jason Singer, and he said, you know, this guy doesn't do the work he's supposed to, he doesn't come to the meetings, then we would say.
Well, it's raised, we're considering the issue in general, but the appropriate time to
Sure.
think about it if
Sure.
we're gonna do it.
Right, but I think that's what we were thinking of when we put that in there. Did that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I understand what you said. I don't know that it directly, that group can decide that a person doesn't have the skills or interest, even if they want to be on it, by simply not voting them on the board.
Right,
Right.
exactly. Any other questions or comments on this, or any other changes anyone thinks? Any comments from the audience?
Irene Caliendo, 411 Hawk. I very much appreciate that council is taking up this issue. I was one of the 2 letter writers, and I believe it's extremely important. I thought this last process, while very much opened up, was still, for lack of a better term, meaning this a little more broadly, an old boys network. And there really wasn't an opportunity for new blood, and there really wasn't fairness in the process, since council members participated in their own interviewing and selection. And so I would not only advocate for this, but I definitely think that term limits for just general citizens, to allow for new blood, new ideas, and not just the, oh, we know Harry, and even though Loretta might do a much better job in reality. And then finally, I would also ask you, and I know that if you do what you've discussed here, this is a great leap forward, but I would also ask that for those council members that are on authorities and commissions and boards, other than as a liaison or an ex officio member, that if there's more than 12 months left in that term, then they be asked to resign that position, and then you fill it at that point. Because I mean, you've got somebody who was just reappointed, and there's 4 years and 11 months left in the term. So I think that would be a good faith in order, not only what our charter says, but what our mission statement says. And then finally, I'd also like to thank the 2 council people who did voluntarily resign their committee memberships, just to acknowledge that we want the citizens to be more involved. Thank you.
Before you go, may I ask a question?
You may, certainly.
What's the kernel of what you're saying? A council person should not participate participate as a member of a committee? Is that what you're saying?
Well, for example, and I feel badly she's not here because I'm going to be talking about her, but just because it's the process that I witnessed, that for the library authority, Mrs. Powers had, first of all, I think incorrectly applied for the position, but then beyond that, she sat here, participated in the interview for all of the other applicants, and then voted on that position. Well, that's not exactly fairness in due process, and I have to tell you, I for one was shocked when all of the interviews were done, and then Mrs. Powers interviewed for that position. Well, there really was no point in any of the others of us showing up, truly.
Well, I have something that's gonna make you feel good.
Okay.
You wanna feel good? I'm on the MIDA, that's the only thing that I'm on. That doesn't require a tremendous amount of work. I'll resign from that as quickly as I can, we'll get somebody else appointed.
Well, I would appreciate that,
Okay.
Councilman. Thank you very much.
Thanks. That's putting my money where my mouth is. so to
Okay,
speak.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Any council members free to do that, but in the interest of not just pulling the rug out from under people and, causing a bunch of upheaval, just grandfathering people in is the best solution that we came up with. But anyone who, would like to resign, if not now, maybe, later down the road, then,
But would it make more
have that
sense, in
option.
spite of what I just said, to give time for a transition by doing it for no more than another year? Would
If
it-
you
would it-
just,
Well,
if
hopefully
you
you
turn
would.
in, just like what
Yeah.
Bill and Carolyn did, if you
Yeah.
just turn in, your resignation upon appointment of the next
Okay,
person.
that's what I'll do.
And then,
I'll do
and
that.
then when we appoint the next person, okay. Any other comments? Okay, all right, then, the zoning finance,
Wait.
did you have something, Greg?
No, I was just wondering, we had the attorney's engagement letter. Are we going to discuss that, or did you sign it already?
I didn't sign it yet. The email I sent out said, if you have questions or comments, please let me know. I got a comment from Council President.
Okay, well, yeah, the only comment I had was the interest rate on unpaid bills at 1 point, I think it's a percentage and a half.
Usurious.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, you gotta make sure you pay your bills.
Well, what if there's the dispute with it?
When there's a legitimate dispute, of which there have been at least 3 I can think of over the last 8 or 9 years, there's no interest demand.
Well,
I'm
does it
not
say,
gonna
does it say
pay
that
it.
in the letter?
I'm not gonna pay it. I'm not gonna put a check, I'm not gonna sign it, I'm not gonna put on a list of bills and check this one. We're not gonna pay it. I guess we can say it in the document. If there's a dispute, we ain't paying. We'll hire an attorney to defend us.
Well, you lose. You're not gonna win against him, Gavin.
I don't,
I bet you just Gavin would not actually
I don't think he would do
enforce
that.
that.
I'm not sure we've ever tacked any interest onto any past due
Yeah, but why have it in there, you know?
Because we reserve the right to do it, because there are, and that's standards required by the firm, because because not McCandless, but there are sort of we occasionally run into a client who's a little slow pay or no pay, and we have to reserve the right to kind of recover some of the collection fee. So, that, I don't know that I even have the authority to waive that, to be honest with you. But if it's a huge deal and the council wants me to revisit that with my partners, I can circle back with council.
Well, I know we're coming back in like 3 months and kind of evaluating things and seeing, if we're happy how things are going and do that. So at that time, if you want that,
Okay.
if you want that out, we can get that out. Anything else about that?
No.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.